4%, so he had a very good year. But of course, that means that all of us will be paying more for things like my coat here. Patty Ann?
And it is a very nice coat. All right, Peter Barnes live in Washington with Fox Business Network. Thanks.
Well, of course, the folks in Washington are keeping a close eye on the economy, and politics will play a major role in any recovery or not. Joining us now is Bonjean, who was a communications director to former House Speaker Dennis Hastert, and Richard Goodstein is with us, a Democratic political consultant who was an advisor to Hillary Clinton's 2008 campaign. Richard, let me start with you, because we heard from President Obama in remarks he made right before he went to Hawaii that the Republicans will find with greater power comes greater responsibility. At what point do you think the president is going to start to try to push the onus on the Republicans and say, you know what, you guys are working here in Washington as well, you're in charge of the House of Representatives, unemployment's still high, it's your problem too?
Look, they're in this together. I don't think it's a question of pushing the onus on them, because the fact is, at the end of the day, and Ron certainly knows this as well as anybody, when the public looks at how the economy is performing, it's the president who gets either the credit or the blame. Look, we saw what happened in 2008 when the Democrats controlled the House and the Senate, but the public was kind of ornery, not feeling good about the economy, and the party that suffered were the Republicans, because George Bush was in the White House. So I actually do think the president wants to collaborate, and I think the area, frankly, where he can make the biggest difference, and the only way they could get it done is through divided government, is entitlement reform. I think if that gets done, or at least started, it does kind of reassure the markets, and if it doesn't, people kind of look at these deficits out as far as the eye can see, and it's not a very pretty picture.
Richard's going there. He's going there. Ron, nobody else seems to be talking about entitlement reform. Are Republicans going to do that?
Well, I'll tell you what. Right now, America has high unemployment, 9.8% unemployment. You've got spiking gas prices and weak consumer confidence. Now's the time to reassure the country that we're going on the right track. I think President Obama needs to appoint a new head of the National Economic Council that's focused on jobs, job creation, and not necessarily spending and bailouts. I think he's going to have to work with the Republicans who are going to be running the House and elected to the majority, because they focused on cutting taxes and cutting spending in their campaigns. And so there's lots of low-hanging fruit right now. For instance, cutting discretionary spending, cutting programs right now that exist. I know that Senator Tom Coburn was talking about over 100 job training programs that exist within the federal government.
I know, but Ron, you know as well as I do, that's not going to cut it. That's not going to make a big enough difference.
You're absolutely right. It's going to take a lot more than that, and there's a lot more to go after. And at some point, they're going to have to tackle entitlement reform. But I think at first, these guys are going to have to learn how to work together in a bipartisan way. And that means taking steps forward on discretionary programs. And Republicans are going to be looking at that $1 trillion health care reform law.
Yeah.
And looking to cut that as well.
You know, Richard, the president also said that cutting spending was one of his priorities when he came back to work in January. I think that probably caused some people to chuckle, probably Ron on the other side of the screen from you. But what if the president did come in and try to take the upper hand here and appear at least to be serious about cutting spending? Could he do it, and where would he start?
As you just indicated, the money, it's kind of like, why do you rob banks? That's where the money is. Entitlements are where the money is. The pledge to America that the Republicans ran on this year said they were going to cut $100 billion in spending. That's good if they could kind of pull it off. But you tell me, if you're a Tea Party member running for re-election and you say, I took that $1.3 trillion deficit and brought it all the way around to $1.2 trillion, re-elect me, I don't think that's going to cut it. And the reason it's not is because, again, discretionary money is not where the cuts need to be made. The cuts need to be made in the area that the public, frankly, doesn't want cut, in Medicare and Social Security, which is why, again, it's got to be done in a bipartisan way. Incidentally, the president worked with Tom Coburn when they were both in the Senate on efforts to reduce the size of government and so forth. So I know in some quarters it seems like a preposterous notion that Barack Obama wants to reduce the size of government. I think his record is actually quite different, and I think the public will be pleasantly surprised.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there, but there will be plenty more to talk about. I want to come back and talk again in 2011 about entitlements and the discussion. A real hard talk about that, guys. We'll have you back, Ron and
Thanks,
Richard.
Rick.
Happy New Year to you both.
Thank you. Same to you.
Happy New Year to you.
Fox Fox News Alert, new information and incredible live pictures.